My name is Ebony Ewing, and my topic is on residency restrictions. Going into the first article is called The Effectiveness of Residence Restrictions in Preventing Sex Offense Recidivism, and its main focus was to investigate the efficacy of sex offender residence restrictions in preventing sexual recidivism. And the sample that was used was the arrest histories in Jacksonville, Florida, only to assess the effects of a recently expanded municipal 2,500-foot residence restriction ordinance on sex crimes and sex offense recidivism. And for Article 1 and how it was conducted, they did at first use a routine activities theory, and it had three conditions that coexisted in time and space to create situations in which crimes were most likely to occur. And the first was the presence of a motivated offender, access to a potential victim, and the absence of capable guardians to prevent criminal activity. And Jacksonville, Florida, the city ordinance was enacted on July 1st, 2005, and it prohibited sexual predators from residing within 2,500 feet of any school, public library, daycare center, park, playground, or other places where children regularly congregate. And also, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office provided arrest data for all individuals arrested between March 1st of 2003 and December 31st of 2007 for sex-related offenses such as rape, sexual battery, and any other type of sexual assault behavior. And also, Florida defined the word predator as a repeat offender convicted of more than one sex crime or an offender convicted of an egregious sex crime. For example, abusing a minor by someone who does not know the child. And so the intervention stage was set for July 1st of 2005. And it was for them to examine offenses before and after. And also the index offenses were those who were arrested between the noted dates. And so the criminal histories that were provided included prior and subsequent sexual and non-sexual arrests for the offenders who initially fit the criteria. And for all the offenses ranging from the intervention to the end of the data set, these cases, 41% of them were classified as felonies under law. And however, a minority of unique cases in the data, which was 29%, featured one or more sex offenses as previously defined. And even fewer cases of 7% met the criteria for a resurfaced sex offense. So the sex offender arrest histories were analyzing several ways to thoroughly evaluate available evidence. And at first, they compared sex offense counts in pre-intervention period with counts in the post-intervention period. Then next, the effects of the Jacksonville ordinance were to be observable in a time series sequence plot, which displays monthly counts of sex offenses in the pre-intervention and post-intervention periods. In this article, it also used 4 table charts to show the difference of sex offenders, race, sex, age, the sex crime, arrest, felony, and sexual assault recidivism by using the auto-regressive integrated moving average regression model. And so the results came up as it indicated that there were significant differences in sex crime areas before and after the passage of the Jacksonville ordinance, but not in the expected direction. So sex crime arrests increased in the post-policy period. Then recidivistic sex crimes increased in frequency after the ordinance went into effect. So the model explained that race was inversely correlated with sex primaries, indicating that non-whites has slightly lower odds of being arrested for sex crimes, and males and older offenders in the sample had higher odds of being arrested for a sex offense. And felony offenders had greater than 11 times the odds of being arrested for a sex offense. Now, going into the second article, is called Registered Sex Offenders and Reported Sex Offenses. Its main focus was to examine whether incidences reported of sex offenses are higher in proximity to the addresses of registered sex offenders. And the sample that was used was the relationship between the number of reported sex offenses and the number of registered sex offenders living in square grid cells in Indianapolis. And to go further into it, the data that was used for this study was by the Indianapolis Police Department crime incident data from 2004 to 2006, and Indianapolis also enacted it of July 1st of 2005. And they used a unit analysis. So for this study, IPD service area, it sailed in 1,000 to 1,000 feet grid cells. And the size of the gray cell is based on their best judgment about balancing random variation associated with smaller cells, only with the desire to reduce the possibility that larger cells would max relationships among smaller units. And its distance between potential locations of offenders and offenses within the area could be far greater than 1,000 feet to 2,500 feet distance, because of how it opposed to risk. And so the registered sex offenders in Indianapolis, the Sex and Violent Offender Registry was effective of January 1st of 2003, and its offenses for which registration is required included child molesting, child exploitation, child seduction, sexual misconduct with a minor, which is an A, B, or C felony, incest, sexual battery, kidnapping, if it's a victim under 18, criminal confinement, if it's under a victim of 18, and in possession of child pornography. And also the RSOs are not to reside within 1,000 feet of school property, public parks, or youth program centers in Indianapolis. So, on July 1st, 2005, there were 1,940 registered sex offenders listed in Marion County of Indianapolis specifically. So, it was possible that they were still living near the cell, which may have affected sex offenses. And they also, they did the study and 5 outlier cells were eliminated because they contain unlikely numbers of the RSOs or reported sex offenses. So one cell reported 52 sexual offenses against minors, and it was highly unlikely that the cell containing the Marion City County building downtown would be more than 5 times as dangerous for child sex offense victimization as any other area in the city. And that area, specifically in downtown, was also listed as the location where the offense was reported, but the offense occurred elsewhere. And they also had research that is showing that extensive prior research was certain about socioeconomic characteristics of an area and how it was related to crime, but therefore they controlled for socioeconomic disadvantage. And the results of this analysis suggested that there were differences in reported sex offense depending on the rate of non-sex offenses in an area, and which they had expected. And the results also showed that the number of RSOs in a cell or within certain areas or distances of a cell was not a consistent predictor of report in sex offenses of the cell. And so the comparison between these two articles was that The sex offenders are to be at least 1,500 to approximately 2,500 feet away. And then both articles, they also believe that most policy assume those convicted of sex offenses are very likely to commit additional sex offenses, but a small percentage of cases find sex offenders are relatively low rates of reoffending and do not necessarily specialize in sex crimes. And the last thing was made policies on where sex offenders reside or go. So Indianapolis and Jacksonville, Florida have both resided on where sex offenders may stay or where they go.